This is CBS News Bay Area with Reed Cowan.
It's meant to keep us all connected, help us reach our loved ones and others. But is social media, with the constant information, messages, images, too much for our kids?
I've tried. It's definitely hard putting the phone down. It really is, and putting social media away. But I realized that was the biggest issue in my own self-esteem issues as a woman.
The constant comparison is always going to be, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough.
When the world went into lockdown, we all went to our screens. But what were our kids and teens missing by looking down?
Part of the task of adolescence is to develop an identity, to figure out who am I. And that gets really complicated when social media is your primary way of interacting in the world.
Now, our challenge is to look up and make their mental health our top priority. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Reed Cowan. Let's start this broadcast like we did yesterday and the day before, love for our kids. Today we focus on this week-long community conversation on the impacts. And we're focusing on social media and the effects it has on our kids, my kids, your kids. A lot of kids out there facing mental health challenges due to social media and the overuse of it. You know, after years of pandemic isolation and other factors, this is really something that's taken its toll. So this half hour, you're going to hear directly from teens and their parents and their experts as we look for ways forward, solutions to ending this crisis. So let's build our case right now. Here are the numbers for you. And moms and dads, aunts and uncles, grandmas and grandpas, listen up. These sort of took me back as well. Our teenagers spend an average of 8 hours a day looking at their phones. That is information that's according to published information in the JAMA Pediatrics journals. The study also shows that sixth graders, just sixth graders, pick up those phones between 100 and 400 times a day. And the number one thing they look at, social media.
I definitely see the link between social media use and problems with insomnia, sleep cycles, appetite, developing depression, developing eating disorders. And quite frankly, I think just the longer that you're online as a child, as a teenager, the greater chance there is to have these potential impairments.
So let's talk about TikTok. They say they have a new way to prevent teens from endlessly scrolling on their app. And in the coming months, TikTok says accounts for users under the age of 18 will default to a 1-hour screen limit. But we're also understanding that that can be turned off so kids can go right back to scrolling on TikTok. So joining me now, Irene Chen, a high school junior involved in mental health advocacy. Did the numbers take you by surprise, looking at the phone sometimes 100 to 400 times a day?
Yeah, I think that definitely is surprising. I mean, while you're looking at your phone 100, 400 times a day, you're not exactly aware that that's the number of times that it's happening. So, yeah, definitely hearing the raw numbers is a little bit shocking.
All right, and so it's been really important to us here at Channel 5 at KPIX CBS Bay Area that we let our viewers hear from our kids. What's the impact of social media in your school hallways and at home during the homework hours?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely think that with social media, it's sort of created a situation where we already did feel a lot of, academic pressure, a lot of social pressure, but with the addition of social media, you also sort of have that additional aspect where not only to be perfect when you're in person in schools, but as soon as you leave school, and even oftentimes when you are at school, you now have that added expectation to be perfect online as well through an online presence. So yeah, I think that sort of just adding on all these pressures has definitely sort of made mental health a more pressing issue.
And you know what, for the adults out there, you think, well, what does a kid have to be worried about? But you're worried about scholarships, you're worried about grades, you're worried about all of the things that are coming down the pipeline. We live in a world that's much sped up. And so you're saying the added pressure of social media, like you heard the doctor right off the top, they're always going to feel like they're not good enough. Right. So is there a healthy way for young people to interact on social media that you've found?
Yeah, I definitely think there is. I mean, we saw through the pandemic, there is like this amazing side of social media where there is like a sense of community and a sense of connectiveness that it can bring. And I think that first and foremost, people just need to remember that, things that you see on social media aren't always how they seem. They're seeing,
engineered.
Absolutely. You're seeing like these 1 to 2 second snippets of people's days, and you're kind of comparing yourself to them, or you're kind of feeling like, oh, like maybe this is what I need to measure up to. So I think first and foremost, by remembering that, not everything is as perfect as it might seem on social media, can sort of help lessen that pressure in a sense.
What do you do? And your dad's here in the studio. It was important to us that our parents are here in the studio for these conversations. What has worked for you? Do you limit your time, or do you have an inner dialogue, or even a mantra you use when you're scrolling through and you start to feel the bad feelings? What do you do?
I think for me personally, it's sort of this way of like framing things. I mean, it's definitely tough at times when, I don't know, maybe you're at home at a certain time when you feel like, oh, like maybe I should be out with my friends and like having all these fun experiences that other people seem to be having. But I think, I'm sure everyone feels that way at a certain point. So it's just important to remember that, it's all about how you sort of frame that situation. Maybe, the next weekend you'll be the one who's out and about and having friends.
Last question, and help me as a dad. How much should I monitor my kids' social media activity, and is it possible to do it? Her dad's smiling back there.
I don't know. I think it definitely, coming as a parent, you should definitely be, trying to support your child as they go through all these stages in high school and such. But in terms of monitoring social media, I think that just, having a sense that they are able to sort of have a life and identity outside of what is being put online. And I don't know, I think all you can do is really just let them go through this experience, I guess, coming from a kid, of course.
And love them while they do it. You say coming from a kid, but I'm a strong believer that if we listen to our kids, they'll lead us, and I appreciate your leadership today. I wish you a great future, a happy future, and maybe a little less social media, Irene.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So if you at home or somebody you know is in a crisis, or you just feel like maybe they need some help, you can get that help from the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by calling or texting 988. And to hear candidly from our youth about their struggles with mental health and social media and all of the things that are pressures on our youngest citizens, we're bringing a very powerful CBS documentary to you exclusively. Gather your family around, get ready to have some conversations. It's streaming tonight at 7:30 p.m. You can watch it for free right there on the CBS News app. Still ahead, a difficult, sometimes sensitive subject, and the dire consequences of mental illness, taking one's own life. A father and a friend of mine share his story, his son's story. We're going to find out how he's now working to help other families right here in the Bay Area before it's too late. Stay tuned for that. On this day that we address difficult issues facing our youngest people, we are very sad to bring you this breaking news out of Santa Rosa. A 16-year-old student has died after being stabbed during a fight at Montgomery High School. This information coming to us right now from the Santa Rosa Press-Democrat. They're very close to the scene right now. The report says another 16-year-old was stabbed but survived, and a 15-year-old was arrested. That school put on lockdown. You can see police there responding to parents, kids coming out of the school. Eventually, the classes were canceled in the wake of this violence. We're watching this situation. We'll continue to keep you updated. So that really is an object lesson. Our kids are experiencing a lot of difficulty right there at the school level. And this week we are addressing the problem with mental health crisis attention. In fact, we're looking to the leaders at the CDC, who recently found that 42% of high school students reported feeling persistent sadness, persistent hopelessness, and they found that thoughts of suicide are rising. Sadly, too often those thoughts turn to action. We want to say right here as we go into this conversation, it might be difficult or triggering for some of you to watch or to listen to. We want to give you the opportunity to take a deep breath, because we're going to talk about the worst case scenario right now. That happened to Avery Burton. Look at Avery right there. You'd look at Avery any day of the week and you'd see a star athlete. You'd know he was a straight A student, fit, loved his family, served his community. But all the while, Avery was fighting an internal battle. And Avery Burton, our world lost him to suicide. Now his dad is speaking out to help youth address the crisis of mental health. This is my friend Reggie Burton. He's joining me live. Reggie, it's good to see you, my friend. We always talk under difficult circumstances, but I know that after the loss of your son Avery, you created the Avery Burton Foundation, and you'll be in the Bay Area soon to help lead us in a conversation about mental and emotional wellness. Talk to us about the impacts of social media, first of all, because that's really been what we've been talking about during this show.
Yeah, no, first of all, Reed, it's good to be with you. And thank you for taking a leadership role on this important topic and having me be part of this conversation. Yeah, the loss of my son, Avery, was very difficult in the sense that it was almost unbelievable how quickly someone can go from things we associate with stress, anxiety, maybe even some depression, to suicidal ideation and then suicidal attempts on their life. And that essentially is what happened with Avery. In terms of the social media impact you have been discussing on your show, I think that relates back to what we call as mental health advocates are triggers, things that propel or trigger someone emotionally to feel a certain way about different points in their life. As an example, an adolescent who is graduating from high school, contemplating that next step to college or whatever is next in their life. That college graduate who graduates from college and then is faced with the difficult decisions around either more schooling or what's next with life. Those are transitions that are oftentimes very difficult to manage for a young person as well as adults. But for adolescents, absolutely, very, very, very difficult to manage and something we should all keep an eye on.
And, those transition points are points that we as adults need to be aware of. And, like you say, elementary to junior high, that's a transition moment. Junior high to high school, transition moment. High school to college, college into the real world. What can we do to help our kids who are in those transition moments, aside from being mindful that, yep, we're in that season, better have our eyes and ears on this?
Well, I'm going to keep it very simple at the most basic level, and that's communication. It's what we are doing right now, which is having a conversation. I have started my nonprofit, the Avery Burton Foundation, with the sole purpose of educating families on what to look for, because I believe that we can do better when we know better. So with that in mind, our nonprofit is now involved in something called mental health first aid training. So I am a trained facilitator of mental health instruction. So I will be in the Bay Area March the 23rd, speaking to a group of Santa Clara County Optometric Society, about 80 to 120 people, about these topics and how they can help their patients and really help their colleagues.
I think what you've offered to us that is so valuable is to look at those transition periods. If we had more time, we would go into some other things that are so important. I'm going to push some tips to all of you on my social media handles, something that Reggie gave to me that he wants to make sure that you're aware of to help people who might be in crisis. Reggie Burton, you are my friend and my brother, and I send you my love. I'm so thankful for what you've done. This is just right here on the screen, just a precursor of what I'm going to tweet out to help people. But I wish you well. I know all of your work, your life's work is a love letter to Avery, and I'm so proud of you. Thank you so much. We welcome you to the Bay Area when you get here a little bit later this month. We want to remind our viewers, if you know somebody who is in a crisis, get help from the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. They have resources and tools, especially for those transition periods for our young people. All you have to do is call or text 988. We can't afford to lose one more young person in our world. At social media and your eyesight, how all the time spent on screens affects our kids' physical and our mental health through their eyes. Welcome back for this important community conversation on youth mental health. We've talked about how social media can affect our kids' mental health, and we're learning that part of that actually comes from how it affects their physical health, their eyes. Joining me now, Dr. Jeanette Lee, a Bay Area optometrist. And let's talk about this. When the pandemic hit, a lot of kids turned to their phones. What's the connection between social media, our eyes, and youth mental health?
Well, during the pandemic, everyone, I would say adults and children, increased by 30% to 40%, right? Everything was remote distance learning. They were online, and all the social part was all online as well. So, any conversations, the amount of time in front of the computer and definitely the phone, your blink rate drops 67%. So just the fact of just staring for a long time causes dry eyes. I had a lot of kids coming in that couldn't see anymore because their eyes were so dry that I had to treat them. We were one of 5 offices that stayed open during the whole pandemic. So one, dryness of the eyes, and just kind of the fear of missing out, but everyone wanted to be in tune with everyone, that the amount of time they spent on the phone, everyone's eyes got worse. The talk the last year in the optometry world was myopia prevention. The distance vision got worse for a lot of people. So if you imagine, staring at your phone, laptop and desktop, you're staring at one orientation from arm's distance to closer. So imagine holding a weight in your hand, right?
Right.
And then contracting a little bit more and even more. People stay in that locked space. So what happens, the eyes will change, the stigmatism will change, and they'll get more nearsighted.
And what's fascinating to me also is the effects of looking at that screen, especially at night, on sleep. Sleep is so important to mental health. Talk to us about that.
The self-care is huge. The mental health of staying online, once your brain is so active, it can't shut down. So it can't shut down. What people do is they go back online, right? Video watching, connecting with their loved ones or WhatsApp, but all the stuff online and videos just makes eyes much worse. And then they have a lot of the radiation coming from the blue light. So having the right filters is important. But mentally, without having enough rest, then they're living in another space that's a little altered reality. And if they're in that space constantly, they're just not living today's life and in an authentic life too, and reality. So that puts them in a different space. And I see a lot of patients that are depressed. I see kids walking in when they were during the pandemic. This 9-year-old girl, I remember distinctly. I said, "Oh, how are you doing? How's the pandemic happening and what's going on?" She's like, "I'm about to have a nervous breakdown." This is a 9-year-old child.
A 9-year-old.
9-year-old. I said, "Why do you say that?" She's like, "I don't mind being at home. I kind of like that at first, but it's too much. I'm a little bit quiet, but it's like, I just want to see my friends. It's not even the touch or feel, just being around that space, right? Staying cooped up at home was really, really difficult for people. Now that everything's opened up, it's better, but a lot of people still felt the isolation. Some of my patients that were quiet and more home-based, they not as social, they said it was even too much for them. They just needed to get out. So, between the eyes and the social media was how they connected the world, they still weren't in a mentally good space. And that spiral happened where if they don't feel good, then they're depressed.
Yeah.
Have someone to speak to. Something online is still detached, right?
Right.
Warmth and just the nonverbal cues lets people know if you really care.
Which is the human-to-human touchstone that is so important. Doctor, we could talk to you for hours and hours. We appreciate your time and these thoughts right now. So fascinating to really put that together, the connection between the eyes, the brain, and our emotional selves. Thank you so much, Dr. Jeanette Lee. We appreciate you. So to hear candidly from youth about their struggles with mental health, we're bringing a very powerful CBS documentary to you exclusively. It's on our stream tonight at 7:30. And we continue to follow that breaking news out of Santa Rosa. We're talking about difficulties teenagers face. Well, just minutes ago, police have confirmed that a 16-year-old student has died after being stabbed during a fight at Montgomery High School. We don't know a lot of details about what was happening in those moments, but police say another 16-year-old was also stabbed but survived, and a 15-year-old has been arrested.
Our medical staff arrived here on the scene and quickly started treating the students, and they were transported to a local hospital. Unfortunately, one of the students, who's a 16-year-old male and a juvenile here, or a junior here at the Monty campus, passed away at that hospital.
So parents, as your kids log on to social media to learn more about this case, maybe think about what you've learned during this show. We can tell you in this case, the school was put on lockdown. Officials eventually canceled classes. Our Andrea Nakano is headed to Santa Rosa. She will have the latest for you on CBS News Bay Area tonight at 5 o'clock. We'll be right back. We want to leave with solutions to improve the mental health of our youth. Researchers at Colorado College conducted a study with teenage girls and found that just 3 days off of social media, just 3-day break, led to significant improvements in body image.
I really did notice after taking that break that it didn't make me feel good.
Keeping myself busy and putting the phone down, it led me to feel better about myself, and I saw that that was worth it.
Statistically, what we showed is that the reason their body image improved was because their self-compassion improved.
Self-compassion. Students tracked their own social media use. They then wrote essays about it. They say the experience prompted them to remove some of the apps from their phones and be more conscious of their time and interactions on social media. Coming up at 5, a preview of tonight's special CBS documentary called Connecting the Dots. It features youth from around the world who struggle with mental health. Brave confessions by these kiddos. Find out what the filmmaker is urging all of us to do so that we can have a better world. That story and more with Liz Cook and Ryan Yamamoto coming up at 5 o'clock. And we continue our week-long look at youth mental health here at 3 o'clock tomorrow. For now, CBS Evening News is next on KPIX. Local news continues streaming on CBS News Bay Area. We thank you so much for tuning in to yet another day of important community conversation. Love for our kids.